Hello, everyone. Welcome to my podcast for women who want to build a successful career or a business through unlocking their own unique value. Just a quick note for everyone who's listening. Please follow me on Substack so you can get updates about my fresh content. And do please comment and share. I love to hear back from all of you. Today, I'm going to dive into a very hot topic that many of my clients and followers ask to talk about, and that is money, salary, and how our salary reflects our value. And to talk about this, I have invited a wonderful lady with years of experience as a tech recruiter at Google, Meta, and other international IT giants. She's also a transformational coach who serves people through psychology and spirituality. She is currently based in London, but originally is from China. She's open, by the way, to new connections on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to her, and I will share the details in this podcast description. So please welcome Vivian. Hi, Vivian. How are you? Welcome to this podcast, and it's really, really great to have you.
Hey, Luba, thank you for having me. Nice to be here as well.
Great. And your international background, your experience of working with such famous companies as Google and Meta, plus your knowledge of the industry and your strong passion to serve people are, in my opinion, are a very powerful mix. And I am very much looking forward to get your perspectives on this topic of salary and value. And I personally believe that this is extremely important for women in business and in the corporate world as well, because women are often underpaid and undervalued. And in my view, self-value and salary are interconnected. If you do not value yourself and others do not recognize your value, as a result, you will be most likely underpaid. And what are your thoughts on this? Can you tell us a little bit more about you and how you see this problem?
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe I can begin with sharing a little bit about my background. So
Sure.
in the last 10 years, I was recruiting for leadership and executive roles, mostly in tech industry and also in automotive industry. I think both industry are quite dominated by men historically. And also at the same time, I'm a coach. I work with clients in the business sector for their career and professional development. And now I'm creating my own business in service of people on their spirituality path with transformational coaching as well. Um, in my experience, in the last 10 years, recruiting for tech and automotive industry, I think the most obvious challenge, I would say, in terms of bringing female talents to the companies I was working for, um, was the scarcity of the female talents in those industries to begin with. So especially for leadership and it's very difficult to find female talents, even just to get them to interview. And really credit to companies like Google and Meta, these leading international organizations. They have been spending a lot of effort and the resources on hiring women talents. But the result is the landscape of the gender diversity in the workspace in this industry is just not there yet. Yeah, which is really a shame. Which is a lot of company really want to change the landscape in the workforce.
What do you see in your experience that why is it difficult for companies to attract female talent? What's the biggest challenge from the company point of view, and how do you see this from the people, from the candidates' point of view?
Yeah, so there are a few things. I think in general, I mentioned the scarcity of the female talents. That's from the industry perspective. And also, as a recruiter, I often saw that female has much higher withdrawal rate during the interview process compared to male candidates. Very often they withdraw from the process because their own well-being or some family reasons, or they just don't feel they could pass the interview, or they don't feel like they have enough time or energy to prepare for the interviews, because these companies like Google, Meta, they normally have a quite high high demanding bars for the talents they want to hire. It does require a lot of energy and time to prepare for the almost like an exam like interview. So yeah, so that's one side from the candidate side. Other than that, it's also quite interesting. I saw very different behaviors in women and men in terms of how they negotiate salary at offer stage. You mentioned about, yeah, in the beginning, salary reflect people's self-value, self-worth. Is exactly how I see it as well. So very often, like, first of all, women is less confident and less assertive when they negotiate salary. And oftentimes, men, they begin with the conversation with recruiter about their salary expectation, whereas women barely do that, yeah, in the interview process. Yeah, so as a result, very often women end up getting much less paid for the exactly same job that men do.
Right. And I just want to clarify before I ask you next question, just want to clarify one thing when you said women withdraw from the application process for different reasons. This is very interesting observation. And I just want to link this to the topic of our conversation today of a value. Is this, what's in your opinion as a coach? Is this something that women do because they prefer to, they do not choose themselves first, they prefer to focus on other things rather than putting their own needs first? Or is this because they feel that the environment where they can go in, the work environment, could be too aggressive, to maybe negative, to demanding, and that's not for them, and that's the reason why they withdraw? What do you think?
I mean, there are so many reasons, and it's quite, how to say, based on the context of each individual's circumstances, right? Like the very commonly, the reasons I've been observing is like their own well-being, like they're not feeling well enough, or they don't feel they have energy to actually invest into this interview process. My own interpretation, I also personally feel that a lot of women in this industry could feel quite alone, because the system, the company is originally designed by men for men. And imagine you are living in a world that's not really designed for like female friendly, and it could take much more energy for you to be successful, for you to function there even. So so well-being is a very big part of the reason many candidates withdraw from that. And also to your point, there's a lot of social factors as well. I don't want to say like women always take the caregiver role in the family, but very often time, like it does look like a lot of women, they prioritize taking care of the family, and they're less likely to relocate, yeah, compared to other candidates. So yeah, so the prioritization part, I guess, is also reflecting their own value, what they prioritize between family and other stuff, comparing to work as well. Yeah, and I'm sure there are also other different cases that people probably don't think it's a good culture fit, or they don't think they can pass the interview. That's also a very big part of the population who withdraw with the interview as well.
Interesting. And thank you for sharing this. And what about different cultures? Because you yourself work in an international environment, but you come originally from China. Do you see that candidates withdraw from the process? Also, there is some kind of, I would say, behavior patterns that you notice based on the culture where these people are coming from?
That's an interesting question. I guess for me, there's no easy answer to say because I could never really know what's really going on in their head when they withdraw from the or when they're in the middle of the interview process. For me personally, I can speak for my own from my own experience is that it's definitely quite challenging to adapt to a different culture, even at workplace. For all honesty, Google and Meta, a company like this, they're quite diverse in their workforce already, even though like there's a lot of adaptation needed to adapt to the work culture, the international culture, and also how the company operates. So I feel like I definitely hear a lot of people around me with similar background talking about imposter syndrome. That I think people talk about it a lot. You feel like you don't um, fully belong there, or you feel like you need to fake it until you make it a little bit when you just join the company because you're coming from very different backgrounds. So that part is actually a lot of things going on in each people's head based on their own background. I guess for each person, they're all different. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can see your point. And so coming back to the topic of our podcast, salary and value and self-value, do you see that these two components are connected, and how can women strengthen their self-value or create or develop their self-value, and then as a result of it get a higher salary? First question is, of course, do you see that these two things are connected?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the salary you negotiate for is a direct reflection of how you see your own value you can bring to the company, right? So definitely, absolutely.
So would you say that a person really needs to understand his or her value as a person, as an individual, as an expert, and what this person brings to the company in order to understand what kind of money to ask for this position? That would that be the first step?
Absolutely. I think there are a few things there if we unpack it. Like when it comes to salary negotiation, I think assuming the company is willing to pay the same salary regardless of the gender of the candidates, I think it essentially comes down to salary negotiation skills, and it is about communication skills and how much risk you like to take in those negotiations. And also, if we go down a little bit deeper, it's actually about self-worth, exactly to a point. How much you see your own value you can in yourself and how much value you can bring to the company. So like I would say most of the candidates go to that stage, they have excellent communication skills. So I don't think it's really about communication, but it's very much about how much risk you like to take. And typically, generalization, men are more likely to take more risk than women. That's, I think, a known fact. But also how much self-worth you see, how much self-worth you perceive in yourself is also very much going to impact how you communicate in those conversations and how much you're going to ask for, right? So that's a few factors really going to change the dynamic in that conversation as well.
Right. I really like how you bring into the conversation the risk factor and the communication, because this is where I also see women tend to be more risk averse, and it is indeed about taking risks. So in a way, I see that women need to develop that skill, become more open to risk in order to achieve their goals, and be more outspoken, communicate in the right way, talk about their self-value, and be not afraid to say these things. And I see that indeed women tend to women do not do this enough, and that's why they get underpaid, and And that's where we get this gap. And I have a question, because if a person, for example, feels that he or she is underpaid at work, how would you ask for a salary raise? What would be your recommendation?
That's a great question. So I think, like you mentioned earlier, the whole issue actually begins with your self-value. So to begin with, I think it's really important to work on your own self-value. Like to know your value to begin with. That's the very starting point.
How would you
Imagine
work
if
on
you
that?
do not believe.
How would you work on that, on
Yeah,
yourself?
yeah, that's a big question. So uh, to improve your self-value or self-esteem. But in this case, really know that when the company is willing to hire you, that's is a proven you have value to the company already. And I'm not suggesting women should ask for more salary than men, but if we talk about the essential the dynamic between demand and needs, sorry, supply. Actually, women actually is more scarce in the market, and actually we have higher demand to hire women talents in those sectors. And you should have full confidence that you're worth more, you at least worth equally or even more in the market, because there's such a scarcity in the market for those female talents. Yeah, so know your value. That's really a very important first step. And then realistically, you also need to do your research. And I found quite interesting that a lot of the male candidates, they tend to negotiate salary with very clear expectation. They will give you very clear number. Yeah. So for example, my expectation is XYZ, and I wouldn't accept offer below XYZ, things like that, or a certain percentage. They're just really clear, assertive in their how negotiate salary. Right. In a way, almost unapologetic about being straightforward about it. I know there are a lot of cultural nuances there. Different cultures tend to navigate this conversation differently, but it really helps for the recruiter to understand like where's your expectation and where we are looking at. You kind of directing that conversation to what they are seeking for. However, yeah, women, they I definitely hear less women talking about exit number. Normally it's more soft, less clear, be more flexible in terms of actual salary expectation. So yeah, so a second point I think is really to do your research, understand how this role is normally paid in the market, and also even to talk to the work friends you can trust to understand like how you could set your expectation as well. Yeah, that's also important. Third thing, I think, is just simply ask for it, which is seems really simple, but it's not an easy thing to do if it doesn't come natural to you. Like very often, let's say we need help, we never ask, we never get it. If you have certain desire for a certain salary, if you never ask it, you will never get it. Yeah, so just ask for it. So that's something I would recommend for women, how to approach this preparation and during the salary negotiation, how they can navigate that.
Super good and very, very helpful tips. What about, do you recommend to prepare for a conversation like this? Or just go in and
absolutely
start talking?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first 2 points are all work needs to be done before you actually having that conversation. And they're not small work, by the way, like the self-worth part. If you don't really believe your self-value, that's going to show up in the conversation for sure. You wouldn't sound confident or sure if the recruiter asks what can you ask for more details, where's the expectation coming from, things like that. So first of all, there's a lot of work to build that self-confidence and the self-worth in you. And secondly, the work I mentioned about research, that's something you can do via searching on internet or talking to people. So I would say a lot of work actually is done before the conversation rather than during the conversation. Yeah.
Right. So I'm hearing two things while listening to you is that you need to do a lot of sort of self-reflection and preparation in terms of your own self-value, but also you need to prepare very solid arguments why you're coming forward with this request, because you will get a question from a recruiter or from your line manager why you asking, why do you think that you worth it, or what do you bring? Why should we give you a higher salary or a raise? So there are two things. Like, one is that your own perception of how you feel that you're worth it, but also you need to have a solid validation proof of why is that so. And then the other thing is that find the right time, the right moment to start that conversation, right? It's not like you can just walk in and drop it and expect that things will work out right away. That's not how it works, right? Because this is a conversation that you need to have. So you need to have the right mindset going into this, right? It's a conversation, it's a negotiation, it's a communication with other partner that might be interested but might not be interested. So it's a process, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, timing is also important. That gives you more power to negotiate as well during the conversation.
Right. And how do you think coaching can help people, especially people who are not really experienced in having these difficult conversations or negotiating, to develop new skills like better communication, self-confidence, self-value, all of that? How do you see this yourself as a coach, that how this can help people to get better?
Yeah, that's a good question. So because Luba, you're also a coach, I don't know you can relate to this or not. I found it quite interesting is more than often when we started working with clients on, for example, work or relationship related topics, somehow as the sessions go on, we unravel the onions layer by layer. We always hit a wall of self-esteem and self-worth. Yeah, so it's actually a very core fundamental issue for many other issues that are showing up in our lives, different aspects in our lives. So I think to work on this self-value thing is a journey, is ongoing work for everyone. And also, I personally believe that we all have the same value. I mean, we'll talk about value, like we are all valuable human beings as it is, just periods. But where's the problem coming from, right? It's actually coming from how we perceive our own value. And that's kind of changed or shifted over time by conditioning and the programming. So as a coach, our job very often is actually holding up a mirror in front of a client for them to see who they really are. So for them to see who they have been neglecting, like the parts actually they should give more credit to of themselves, or the other way around. Yeah. So actually, I do have a small tips or exercise I can share with the listeners if you'd like to try it to work on their self-value or self-worth. It's a very simple exercise, but very powerful. Basically is ask yourself, what are the 10 things you like about yourself, right? And try to avoid focus on the doing, but focus on the being. So I mentioned about a lot of shift of the how we see our values through social conditioning, but that's very much focused on your external status and the other social environments. That's very much about doing, but just focus on your own being. So what are 10 things you like about yourself? For those who struggle with come up with 10 answers, I think that what they can do is just close their eyes and shift the question to what your best friend or someone knows you really well would answer to that question. Just imagine you are them, you're asking that question in front of you. What would they say about the 10 things they like about you the most? you will find that really interesting. Like very, very often they'll be given very different answers from these two perspectives. I remember in one of my coaching session, my client just burst into tears when she saw how different those answers are, and how little she thought of herself. And yeah, that was a very powerful moment for you to recognize that. Yeah, so to write down those 10 things and keep repeating that to yourself until you really believe that, until you really see you are actually these 10 things that you are really proud of and you really like about yourself. I think that can help a lot with building your self-value and self-esteem.
This is a great exercise. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's really powerful. The answers are already within us, and I really can relate to everything what you said about coaching session when you and the role of a coach to hold a mirror. I also feel that it's our job to help people discover that potential that they have within them, because everybody is valuable. Everybody has the potential. It's just that somehow it is hidden, we forget it, or we tend to hide it for different reasons, but it is there. And it's very powerful when you help people to take it out and start using it, and it gives them a boost, but it also brings greater results, to things that they want to achieve or things that they want to change. And it is amazing to see this, how this transformation happens within a coaching session, right? Within this coaching journey, when you help people to pivot, to see things differently, and this change can happen very quickly. And it's really, really rewarding to see this. So definitely I would say that coaching is one of the best ways to discover your self-value, to work on your self-esteem, and also to prepare for conversations like negotiations or a job interview, all of that. This is indeed always a safe environment where you can practice, where you can open up, where you can explore as well. And you get a lot of support within this in this conversation, right? It is never about a failure. It's always about building the confidence and positive experience. So I do encourage everyone to take advantage of coaching. And this exercise was great. I think this is really useful. I hope people who listen to this podcast will practice it. It's very simple. On the other hand, it's very powerful. I think that's great. Are there any other tips that you want to share as a recruiter or a coach for people who are struggling with self-value or preparing to go into a job interview or a salary negotiation?
Yeah, other than that, I think, like I mentioned, a lot of work I feel like is done by, like, actually outside of the interview, outside of that process. So I feel like a lot of people who suffer from lower self-esteem or self-value, they tend to have a lot of negative self-talk. That's something I've been kind of learning from my own personal experience as well. So I think very often self-value is related to like your relationship to yourself, right? So how you do talk to yourself. So so for those who have that pattern of a negative self-talk, I would recommend just really take the moment, pause when you have that feeling bubbling up in your stomach. Take a pause and recognize the self-talk, and just ask add a question mark to that. Is that true? Like, for example, you feel like I'm not good enough. Is that true? I'm not pretty enough, or I'm just never gonna make it. I would never pass this interview. Is that true? Just really break it down and just add a question mark and to see how you can reframe that. Maybe it is true that after 3 times failed that interview process, it it does say the interview process is too challenging for me in the way they designed it, but doesn't mean I'm not good enough for that company, or in general, I'm not good enough. So to reframe that, and that's another thing I would recommend to help with building self-worth as well. Yeah.
That's a great advice. Thank you for sharing this. It's really great to have this conversation with you. I hope this will be helpful for people who listen to it. And yeah, I would like to end on this note. And thank you again, Vivian, for your perspective and this great exercise and your tips. I wish you all have a strong self-value that is reflected in your salary. And have a great day. And until next time.
Thank you. Thank you, Luba.